Claire Evans had never imagined that her quiet suburban life would be shattered before sunrise. The first sound was the low rumble of engines, a distant growl that grew louder closer, until it became a roar that ripped through the stillness of the neighborhood. Groggy and confused, she stumbled out of bed, pulled on a robe, and hurried to the window. There in the pale light of dawn were two massive bulldozers tearing through her property, her meticulously maintained flower beds, the wooden fence she'd built with her late father, even the small garden shed where she kept her tools, all reduced to splinters and dirt beneath the grinding metal teeth. Claire's heart pounded. She had never received any warning, no letter, no call, no email from the HOA. Nothing to indicate that her property was in violation of any rule, let alone scheduled for demolition. Her mind raced to make sense of it. This had to be a mistake. Grabbing her phone, she ran outside, her bare feet sinking into the soft soil. The workers paused briefly as she approached, their expressions unreadable under hard hats and dust-streaked faces. "What's going on? Who gave you permission to do this?" she demanded, voice shaking with a mix of fear and fury. "We have all the approvals," one of the men replied flatly, motioning to a clipboard held by a foreman standing nearby. "HOA sent us. This fence is in violation. It's coming down." Claire's eyes narrowed. "Violation? What violation? I never received any notice." The foreman shrugged. "You're not our client. We just do the work." From behind her, neighbors began to gather, peering anxiously from behind curtains and doorways, unwilling to get involved but clearly alarmed. Claire recognized the silence as fear, a community cowed by the heavy hand of the HOA, where rules were enforced with ruthless speed and little regard for fairness. Her phone buzzed in her hand, a message from an unknown number. "Stop this fight before it costs you everything." Her pulse quickened. Who was watching her? Who had sent the warning? Claire glanced back at the demolished fence and shed, disbelief turning to resolve. This was no ordinary enforcement. Something darker was at work. Determined, she bent down to gather fragments of the broken wood, the last pieces of what had once been her sanctuary. Questions flooded her mind. Why was the HOA acting without notice? Why now? And most puzzling of all, what did they hope to gain by destroying her property so abruptly? Claire's instinct screamed that this was just the beginning. But as she looked around at the silent faces of her neighbors, none willing to speak up, a chilling realization took root. She might be alone in this fight. Claire sat at her kitchen table, the early morning sun casting long shadows over piles of papers she'd gathered in a desperate search for answers. The demolition had left her shaken, but now anger was fueling her determination. If the HOA claimed her fence was illegal, then where was the proof? The official notice? The permit? Anything? Hours passed as she called every office she could think of, the HOA management, the county building department, the local zoning board. Each time, the response was the same. No record of any demolition notice or permit filed against Claire Evans or her property. Even the HOA's own records were curiously silent. Claire's brow furrowed in confusion and suspicion. How could bulldozers destroy her property with no official paperwork? The absence of a paper trail wasn't just sloppy, it was deliberate. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. "You're digging too deep. Stop now." A chill ran down her spine. Someone was watching her, warning her to back off. But Claire's mind raced faster than ever. Who had the power to bulldoze property illegally? Who could silence neighbors and erase official records? And why was she the target? Determined to push forward, Claire turned to the internet, scanning county land records herself. That's when she stumbled on something unexpected. Her name wasn't just attached to her own property. It appeared on dozens of land records scattered throughout the county. Properties she had never heard of, parcels of land miles away, some abandoned, some clearly developed. A creeping sense of disbelief settled in. How could this be? Was it a clerical error? A strange coincidence? Or was there a secret history buried beneath the surface of her seemingly ordinary life? Claire printed out the records, studying the cryptic legal jargon. Dates and signatures seemed off. Some signatures didn't match. Some deeds appeared altered or forged. The deeper she looked, the more tangled the mystery became. Her phone buzzed once more, this time a call. A voice whispered urgently, "Claire, be careful. They're watching everything. The HOA isn't just a neighborhood group, it's something else. If you keep poking around, they won't stop at your fence." Claire's hands trembled, but she refused to be cowed. Questions multiplied, and a dangerous truth began to emerge. Her family's connection to the land was far more complicated than anyone had ever told her, and the bulldozing was just the first move in a much larger, darker game. She glanced out the window. The street was quiet, too quiet. The friendly faces of neighbors had vanished. Alone in a house shadowed by destruction and secrets, Claire realized this wasn't just about a fence anymore. It was a fight for everything. Claire's eyes scanned the dim glow of her laptop screen well into the night. The pages of scanned deeds and maps spread across the table like a puzzle she was desperate to solve. Each document carried her name, Claire Evans, tied to parcels of land she had never seen, some in remote parts of the county, others in neighborhoods she barely knew existed. Something wasn't right. The more she examined the records, the more contradictions she found. Dates on some deeds predated her birth by decades, and the signatures, some scrawled in elegant script, others hastily scribbled, didn't match official county records. Some deeds even overlapped, claiming the same strip of land belonged to different owners, including herself. Her heart raced. Was this a massive clerical error or a deliberate fabrication? To make sense of it, Claire decided to visit the county recorder's office in person the next day. The sterile building was quieter than she expected, the clerk's desk tucked into a corner with stacks of dusty files. As she requested the original land deeds for her name, a subtle tension filled the air. The clerk hesitated before pulling out a thick binder marked Evans Family and sliding it toward her. Inside, Claire found maps and letters, old, yellowed, some handwritten. It told a story her parents never shared. Her ancestors had once owned vast swaths of land across the county, a legacy lost through years of shady sales, legal battles, and possibly fraud. A chill ran through Claire as she flipped to a letter dated nearly 50 years ago. It hinted at a secret deal involving the HOA's founding members, an agreement that had stripped her family of their rightful claims under the guise of community development. The letter spoke of unofficial transfers and silent agreements, phrases that screamed of conspiracy. But why had the HOA bulldozed her property now? And why did her name remain on so many deeds, as if someone was trying to keep her tied to the land? Lost in thought, Claire didn't notice the man standing behind her until he spoke softly. "You're stirring up things better left alone." Startled, she spun around. The man was middle-aged, dressed sharply, with a cold, calculating gaze. "Who are you?" Claire asked, voice steady despite the sudden fear rising in her chest. "I'm just a concerned citizen," he replied smoothly. "This is bigger than a fence or a few acres. The HOA's reach goes far beyond what you see. You need to decide if you want to be part of this fight or disappear." The warning was clear. Claire's blood ran cold, but her resolve hardened. She wouldn't be intimidated. Back at home, she locked every door and window, but the feeling of being watched clung to her like a shadow. Her phone vibrated again, a cryptic text. "They know you're looking. Stay quiet." But Claire was already too deep. The past was catching up with her, and the secrets buried in those records threatened to rewrite not just her future, but the fate of the entire community. Claire's phone vibrated again late that night, the screen lighting up with a message from an unknown number. "Meet me. I have information you need." Her fingers hesitated over the keypad. Was this a trap? The voice she'd met at the county office had warned her to back off, but Claire's instincts told her this could be her only chance to get ahead. She drove to a quiet cafe on the edge of town, the only light coming from the flickering neon sign and the occasional passing car. The air was thick with tension, every shadow feeling alive. Inside, a man sat alone in a corner booth, hood pulled low over his face. "You're Claire Evans," he said without looking up. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "Who are you?" "Someone who's been watching the HOA for years. They're not just a homeowners association, they're a front. They control land deals, silence opposition, and rewrite history to protect their interests. Claire's heart pounded. Why tell me this? The man slid a worn envelope across the table. Because they don't know what you know, or what you're about to uncover. You're the key to exposing them. She opened the envelope to find copies of internal HOA emails, financial statements, and property transfers, all revealing secret dealings with county officials and developers. The HOA was profiting from selling land parcels they never legally owned, and Claire's family's name appeared repeatedly, as if tangled in the center of a web of deceit. Why involve me? Claire asked. Because your family's legacy threatens their control. They're bulldozing your property to erase the last visible proof you have. But your name on those land records, it's a liability for them. Claire's mind reeled. The bulldozers, the silence, the threats, all part of a larger plan to silence her and erase her family's claim. Suddenly, the man's voice dropped. You're not just fighting an HOA. You're up against a shadow network that runs this county. And they don't play fair. Before Claire could ask more, he slipped out the back door, disappearing into the night like a ghost. Back in her car, Claire stared at the envelope, a mix of fear and determination tightening her chest. She realized now that this wasn't just about reclaiming her yard. It was a battle for truth, for justice, for her family's name. As she drove home, the streetlights flickered overhead. In the rearview mirror, a black SUV appeared behind her, headlights glaring. Her breath caught. The chase had begun. Claire's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she pulled into her driveway. The black SUV she'd spotted earlier slowed and then turned away. But the message was clear. She was being watched. Every move she made was now under surveillance. The stakes had escalated far beyond a neighborhood dispute. Inside her house, Claire spread out the documents the mysterious informant had given her. The emails revealed hush-hush meetings between HOA leaders and influential county officials. There were references to quiet acquisitions, property consolidation, and legacy land cleansing. The words chilled her. This wasn't just about a fence or a garden shed. It was a calculated campaign to seize control of every valuable parcel linked to her family. She cross-referenced the financial statements with county property tax records. The HOA had funneled money through shell corporations to buy properties under false names, masking their involvement. Meanwhile, Claire's name lingered like a ghost in the system, a reminder of a legacy they were desperate to erase. Suddenly, the sound of a window sliding open upstairs snapped Claire from her thoughts. Heart racing, she grabbed her phone and flashlight, creeping toward the noise. A shadow moved near the back window, a figure trying to sneak in. Claire's voice was steady but loud. Who's there? I'm calling the police. The figure froze and then bolted into the night. She caught a glimpse. A man wearing a dark hoodie, his face obscured. Whoever he was, he wasn't just a random trespasser. The realization hit hard. This was no accident. The HOA, or whoever was behind it, was trying to intimidate her, maybe even worse. Claire knew she couldn't trust the neighbors. The silent streets and shuttered windows told her they were too scared to intervene, but she refused to back down. The next morning, Claire met with an old family friend who was also a lawyer. She laid out the tangled mess of deeds, emails, and threats. This goes far beyond normal HOA disputes, the lawyer said gravely. If these documents hold up, you could have a serious case, fraud, illegal land seizures, even conspiracy. Claire felt a flicker of hope, but the lawyer warned her, you'll need solid evidence and witnesses, and you're up against powerful people who won't go down quietly. That afternoon, Claire returned to the county records office, hoping to find any overlooked details. There, buried in the archives, she discovered a series of unsigned, backdated deeds, documents that appeared to have been slipped in to cover tracks. Her pulse quickened. This was the smoking gun. If she could prove these deeds were forged, she could expose the whole scheme. But as she left the office, she spotted a familiar black SUV parked across the street. The watchers were still there. Claire's jaw clenched. The web of deceit was tightening, and the fight for her family's land had just entered a dangerous new phase. Claire sat in the quiet corner of a local cafe, clutching a fragile piece of paper. the ancient deed she had uncovered buried deep in the county archives. The document was yellowed with age, but unmistakably authentic, bearing the original seal of the county recorder's office and the signature of her great-grandfather. It proved beyond doubt that her family had legally owned the disputed lands long before the HOA or any developers ever laid claim. Her heart pounded. This was the ammunition she had needed, the proof that could shatter the HOA's fabricated ownership and reveal their web of lies. But Claire knew this was only the beginning. She called her lawyer, Sarah, who agreed to meet immediately. They pored over the deed and the mountain of forged documents, emails, and financial records Claire had collected. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she connected the dots. "This isn't just a property dispute," she said quietly. "It's fraud, conspiracy, and possibly racketeering. We're facing people who will stop at nothing." The plan was clear. Claire would gather her evidence and present it to the HOA board at their next meeting, a public showdown where the truth would come to light. In the days leading up to the meeting, Claire's nerves frayed under the pressure. The mysterious SUV still lurked near her home, and her phone buzzed with anonymous threats warning her to back down. But the overwhelming support from a few brave neighbors gave her strength. Finally, the night arrived. The HOA meeting hall was packed. Members filled the chairs, many faces stern and hostile. Claire stood at the podium, heart racing but voice steady as she laid out her case. She presented the ancient deed, the forged records, and the evidence of illegal land transfers. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The HOA board chairman, a tall man with a cold smile, tried to dismiss her claims as baseless conspiracy theories. But Claire pressed on, backed by Sarah's legal expertise and the undeniable proof in her hands. Tension escalated as Claire revealed financial links tying board members to shell companies that profited from the land sales. Suddenly, the chairman slammed his gavel. "Enough! This meeting is adjourned." Before Claire could respond, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. A chaotic scramble of voices erupted. When the lights returned, Claire's papers were gone, stolen in the blackout. The room emptied fast, leaving Claire and Sarah standing alone, stunned. Claire's chest tightened. The HOA was desperate, and now the stakes had escalated beyond a simple legal battle. But as she gathered her scattered thoughts, Claire realized something crucial. The fight wasn't just for her property anymore. It was for justice and the truth buried beneath decades of corruption. With new resolve, Claire vowed to take the battle beyond the HOA boardroom. After the blackout at the HOA meeting, Claire felt the weight of defeat settle in, but also a simmering fury. The stolen papers were more than just evidence. They were a message. The HOA's reach was deeper and more ruthless than she had imagined. But Claire refused to be silenced. Determined to recover what was lost, Claire began retracing her steps, hoping to find clues that might lead to the missing documents. Late one evening, as she combed through her emails, she received an encrypted message from an unknown sender. "Meet me at the Old County Archives at midnight. I have what you need." Her pulse quickened. It could be a trap, but it was also a chance she couldn't ignore. At midnight, Claire arrived at the crumbling County Archives building, its rusted doors creaking as she slipped inside. The air was thick with dust and memories. A figure stepped out of the shadows, a woman in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and cautious. "I'm Elena," the woman said quietly. "I used to work for the county recorder's office. I've seen what the HOA has been doing, falsifying deeds, erasing records, and intimidating anyone who gets in their way." Claire's breath caught. An insider. Elena revealed that she had secretly kept copies of original deeds and internal documents that proved the HOA's illegal activities. She handed Claire a USB drive and a thick binder filled with painstakingly gathered evidence. "This is everything you need to expose them," Elena said. "But be careful. They know about me now." That blackout was to scare us both. Claire felt a surge of hope mixed with dread. With Elena's help, she could finally bring the truth into the light. But at what cost? The next day, Claire and Sarah worked to secure the data and prepare for a media leak that would force public scrutiny on the HOA's corruption. They reached out to a trusted investigative journalist, hoping to break the story wide open. As the evidence was leaked, the county was rocked by scandal. The HOA's powerful figures faced calls for investigation, and community members who had stayed silent began to speak out. But the victory was bittersweet. That night, Claire returned home to find her front door ajar. Inside, the house was ransacked, but the USB drive and binder were gone. A note lay on the floor, scrawled in hurried handwriting. "This isn't over. Walk away now." Claire's heart pounded. The HOA wasn't just a neighborhood group, they were a force willing to cross any line. Yet, despite the danger, Claire's resolve burned brighter than ever. She knew that the fight for her family's land and the truth had only just begun. Claire stood in the courtroom, the air thick with anticipation. Months of danger, betrayal, and sleepless nights had led to this moment. A decisive hearing where the truth about the HOA's corruption and her family's rightful ownership would be laid bare. The judge eyed the mountain of evidence Claire's lawyer presented: authentic deeds, internal HOA emails, financial records revealing illegal land deals, and testimonies from Elena and brave neighbors who'd finally broken their silence. The courtroom murmured as the web of deceit unrivaled. But just when it seemed the fight was nearly won, a sudden interruption silenced the room. A man in a sharp suit entered, holding a sealed envelope. He introduced himself as a senior official from the county's land registry. "I have new information," he announced. After reviewing the records, it appears Claire Evans' family ownership was never fully extinguished, but rather hidden within a complex legal trust established decades ago. A trust that legally grants her control over all the disputed properties. The room gasped. This meant Claire's family had been the true owners all along, but their rights had been deliberately concealed by the HOA's manipulations. Claire's eyes widened. The official handed her the trust documents, legally binding and undeniable. The judge nodded solemnly. "This changes everything." The HOA board members exchanged nervous glances. The chairman tried to protest, but the judge overruled him. The evidence shows clear fraud and conspiracy. The HOA's actions are unlawful, and ownership of the contested properties must be returned to Claire Evans. In a stunning turn, the court also ordered a criminal investigation into the HOA leaders for fraud, tampering with public records, and intimidation. As the gavel came down, Claire felt a wave of relief and vindication. The fight had been long and perilous, but justice had prevailed. Later, standing outside the courthouse, Claire was approached by Elena. "You did it," Elena said with a smile. "You reclaimed what was rightfully yours." Claire nodded, looking over the lands stretching beyond her property line, now legally hers again. But just as she turned to leave, her phone buzzed. A new message appeared. "This victory is only the beginning. Watch your back." Claire smiled, her resolve unbroken. She had uncovered a legacy of secrets, faced threats, and survived a ruthless conspiracy. Now, armed with truth and courage, she was ready for whatever came next. Because some battles are never truly over, but neither is the will to fight.